Hello, everyone. Welcome. Today, I want to talk you through foundation models, but quickly, a little bit about me. I'm the lead mobile engineer at Applause, where we own a bunch of super cool apps like Bartender, Nomorobo. But I'm probably most known for indie apps, where I build tools that I think are really useful for just making things that you do every day a bit better, whether that's brewing the best coffee of your life, going on the fastest run you've ever done, or even just storing little paint recipes. An idea I've been trying to work on for quite a while now is the idea of the ultimate AI running coach. I wanted something that would actually feel like a coach. When I've had a coach in the past, I could send them a message and say, hey, what should I do today? I'm too tired, I'm injured, or whatever. And they had all this context about my life. And I felt like AI was a perfect way to bring that back without having to spend loads of money on a coach. Because I could look at sleep data, food, basically whatever I wanted. I could feed everything in and get a perfect answer. And I built this pretty quickly and it was nice. But then I hit a bit of a roadblock in that this was really, really expensive. The amount of data I was feeding in just wasn't really sustainable. And I didn't think I really wanted to charge $20 a month for a subscription. So I kind of left it alone. And then at some point in June, we got my favorite framework since SwiftUI. Apple gave us foundation models and it changed the whole game. Every issue I had, whether it was being worried about privacy, the amount of cost, whatever it was, all of it went away and I could do exactly what I wanted to do. I could do an AI running coach that didn't cost me loads of money and it didn't invade any privacy. With my own data, I was probably okay with sending it to OpenAI. But if I was putting this out to the world, it's a little bit dubious to send all this private stuff. I don't know if I really want some random server somewhere to know that I was stressed and ate too many chicken nuggets, but I'm probably okay with like a local API having that. So as soon as they introduced it, I jumped right in and it just worked. I know Apple loves to say that, but this actually truly does just work. I took the same prompts I was using before, fed them to foundation models, and I got a super cool output. It gave me something useful that told me what to do, told me where I was fastest in my run, told me how to improve. And it's given me some quite good insights over time. So, for example, I live somewhere super hilly, and it keeps telling me, you need to practice running hills more. You're not good at it, which isn't very nice to hear, but it's completely right. And it gave me recommendations. So suddenly an app idea that I thought was dead could come straight back. And it's been really fun to work on that. And I wasn't lying, this took about 2 minutes to get working. I just swapped out my OpenAI stuff, put in foundation models, and it was good to go. So let me take you on a whistle-stop tour of this new framework. I want to show you what it can do, how it excels at just quick little tasks and makes AI in apps possible without worrying about cost or anything like that. You can put AI basically everywhere now, and it's fine. So foundation models have a couple of advantages over other stuff. They're small. They don't quite have the same capabilities as something like ChatGPT, but they are absolutely free. They're private by default. What I mean by this is it doesn't send data anywhere unless you purposefully go send that data somewhere. So you can keep everything local and it all works offline, which is incredible. And they're also really fast, especially if you run it on a newer iPhone. The results you're getting feel kind of similar to if you were running something like ChatGPT or Claude or whatever. It's pretty good. Obviously, experiences differ on older phones, but it's pretty good on a modern one. And when I say fast, I don't just mean fast in terms of how fast it gives you an output on your phone. I mean in terms of how fast it is to get going. This is all the actual code that you need to get foundation models going. You give it a language model session with some instructions, which are just like a system prompt in any other tool you've used, and then you ask it for a response with another prompt. Here I've gone for something simple. I've got a sports assistant to tell me what team should I support. Say I'm going to a new city, I want to go see a sports game. I have no idea who to pick. So I've told it, hey, who should I support? And I asked it for the answer for who's the best baseball team in New York. And the output from this was pretty good. It gave me historical context, it gave me multiple options. Most importantly, it gave me the correct answer. But this was pretty good. And I feel like I'd be happy with this from any AI provider. Now, we can't expect an answer like this for everything. If I ask this about what team should I support in Leeds, it has no idea what I'm talking about. I have to ask it about something that it will already know about. There are some tricks to get around that, though, which we'll look at in a second. There was a tiny little lie I told you a second ago. When I said that was all the code you needed, there's one little exception. You do have to check that the phone can actually run it. but I promise this is actually genuinely the last thing you need. Most people on a modern phone will be able to use Apple Intelligence, but you do have to check, first of all, that they've got it turned on, and second of all, that the model is ready. You'd be surprised how many people just never turned on Apple Intelligence because they just didn't need it or they didn't want the summaries or whatever. So you might have to prompt them to go do that. And then you might have to wait for the model to download. And of course, for some users, they just don't get access to this, which is a shame, but you could always fall back to something else in that occasion. And that's all the basics you need. That gives you an input, gives you an output, and you can do a one shot in your app with something. But you can add quite a lot of like nice little features just with some built-in APIs. For example, if you use basically any chat app, you'll notice that it streams a response to you. You get a line-by-line output, and it's really nice to look at. Apple has given that too, and all we have to do is instead of asking for a response, we ask for a streamed response, and then we just get the output from that. And every time you get this output, it's a little bit longer. So it gives you that effect that ChatGPT has. So it will repeatedly give you the output and you can just do what you want with it. You can wait for it to finish. Do you want to do a fancy animation? It's pretty good and adds some free polish. So you do now have everything you need for simple use cases. If what you're doing is something simple like tagging some content, rewriting a string, then this might actually be all you need. You don't need anything fancy. But we did get a lot of more, like, I like to say fun toys to play with. And I think one of the coolest ones of these is Generable. Everything we've done so far is with text. It's pretty traditional. I've got a prompt and I've asked for something to come back. And that's all I've done. It's just text. But what if we want to do something more specific? Apple has this concept of guided generation. The idea here is quite literally to guide the generation. So you're giving it an extra helping hand to tell it what you want to get out of it and give it some tips along the way. So this, as you've probably guessed by now, is also super easy. This is what Generable looks like. It's not intimidating. If you've ever looked at the JSON schema for like an OpenAI response, that is kind of intimidating. This is all you need. It feels exactly like using a codable. So all you do is annotate with Generable, give it some properties, and go. So if you think about our previous example, I asked it for what team to support, but it gave me 3 different teams and a bunch of context. Whilst that's cool, I sort of don't want that. I want my app to make it so I arrive somewhere, I press a button, and it tells me what team to support. So if I use this, which I can use in my response by just telling it, give me the response as a sports guide by saying generating sportsguide.self, I get something a bit better. This is the response I get out of it this time. I get one team and I get one reason. So I get something which is not super long, it's got a bit less detail in it, but I also didn't want that detail to begin with. So I can use this and it sort of smooths out the response. And usually adding a generable does tidy up the response and gives you kind of what you want. However, you can go a bit further. You can add labels. You can use the guide to tell it exactly what you want. So in this case, I've left the team description pretty simple, but for the reason I said it should be short and informative. That might seem like a no-brainer, but sometimes it will give you a bunch of historical context you don't want, like we saw the first time. And you can get rid of that entirely by saying, give me something short and informative, or give me a cheeky reason why they should support that team. And this will actually change the output for you. And of course, these also work with streaming responses. So if you have a nice UI in your app, you can populate with some fancy animations as these things load in. So I can make the team name come in and then the description. And it could look real nice. And all this is built in for free. Super easy to do. Now, the final tool I want to quickly show you is tools. Tools are what I expand to make this really, really great. Tools take the generables that we've used, or you can just use strings if you really want, and expand to the wider world. So you can connect these models to user context, APIs, whatever you want, even another AI if you feel like it. And it just takes a few lines of code to do this. To set this up, I'm going to make a quick tool that can tell me about Formula One statistics. I want to build an app that can tell me who's winning the championship and who's more likely to actually stay in front, right? Like I could just look at a table anywhere, but it'd be cool to get some insight to say like, okay, is Max likely to catch up or not? So all I've done is made 2 new generables with some labels, and you'll spot here that I've nested some generables. You can nest these recursively, so you can have the structure come out exactly as you want. You don't just have to fall back to strings when you feel like it. Then the output of a tool, this is crazy simple. It kind of reminds me a bit of how the app intents frameworks work. There's just one function that you care about, and then everything else is super trivial. So first of all, we conform to tool, we give it a name, we give it a description. These are both important because they help us make sure that our model uses this tool to begin with. And then we have arguments, which is again generable. Generable works for input and output. And then we get the call function. Now, this is where the magic happens because those arguments are generated by foundation models. So in this case, I have a limit. Realistically, I want to get 3 drivers. I don't want the whole 20 drivers. I just want 3. So when I prompt the system, it will get that number for me and pass it back into my Swift function. And then when I'm in there, I can do whatever I want. I'm not limited to anything. It's just an async function. I return a generable, so I can hit another LLM, another API, any of Apple's APIs. The possibilities are like completely endless. And all I have to do to use this is pass it in when I create my model session. So when I make my model session, I give it the tool. Now, one quick note is that you need to tell it this tool exists. It kind of won't do it on its own. When I was testing this, if I didn't tell it explicitly to use the tool, it would just completely make up an answer. It would talk about Formula One drivers that haven't driven for 20 years and tell me that they're winning the title. I was like, I have no idea where this data has come from. So you have to be quite explicit when you do it. But once you've set this up, you can just use this model like we did before, and you'll get the output you expect. It feels like a much bigger model, all with a much more specific context to what you're expecting. So all I do, same again, tell it that I want Formula One stats, and under the hood, it will use its tool to get the correct information. And if I look at the output from that, it tells me who's at the top, what the drivers are, and it's pretty useful. I could adjust this if I want to be a bit cheekier or a bit more serious, but it's told me that Oscar's winning, Lando's second, and Max is third. This time when I generated it, it was pretty straightforward, but you can also get it to be something a little bit more useful and say, this guy's definitely not going to win by feeding it even more context. I only used one tool here, but I could use loads. I could feed in more tools that tell it how many races are left, historical context about who wins what races, and so on. So there's quite a lot you can do. So that's it for a quick intro to foundation models. If you want to look more at these, there is a workshop later today and tomorrow where we'll implement some features like these. We'll build out the Formula One feature into a little app and hopefully get some time to look at how we can get foundation models into your apps. So that's it from me. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to ask the first question. So with this all being local on the user's device, how do you observe the results when it's in production? Just to make sure that what the content is returning is what you expect and also appropriate.
So I feel like this is where the privacy thing falls apart, right? It's private, but you just have to trust that the output is what you expect. What I would generally recommend is keep running it locally until you get an output that's roughly what you want. And then you should use the options for parameters where you can tell it how much, what the temperature should be. So you can kind of lock in a specific response. So you say, only give me the most likely response every time. And you'll roughly be able to guess that the output is what you saw locally too. Obviously, you could also send a response up to an API or analytics if you want, but at that point, just use OpenAI.
Sounds good. Thank you.
And a question coming from the audience. So how do you handle localization if your app handles several languages? Do you keep the prompt in English and ask the model to generate in different language? Do you also translate the prompt? What would you recommend?
So I've only tested doing it in English and then passing the response to the translation framework, which seemed to work pretty well. I do believe it supports more languages, but I've only seen results as good as the one I showed earlier for like the sports one when I left it in English.
So generate in English and then translate.
Yeah.
So
And the newest like translation APIs that are built in are super fast, so you can really rely on them to give you a good output.
yeah, that's great.
I think we have time for one more question, at least, if we have another in the list. Do we have any more?
Maybe more like one question I was wondering is when you use this local model, it's very easy for it to generate something that gets censored by the framework, and you hit what's called the guardrail. How
Mhm.
do you recommend like designing your app so that it's not frustrating to the user?
So there's two different answers here. So first of all is if you're doing just text outputs, if you're not doing generable, you can kind of loosen the guardrails and it will start kind of avoiding them a bit. So for example, if you use the classic Apple example of landmark recommendations, if you tell it to be cheeky, it will trigger the guardrails every single time. And all it's doing is saying, go on, bruv, go to the Eiffel Tower. But apparently that flags a guardrail. So you can just turn that on. But then for generable, you're kind of limited in that you just have to keep tweaking your prompt as much as you can. Find out what's triggering the guardrails, and you can check the transcript to understand what did trigger it because it will just stop outputting at a certain point, and then just make sure the prompts don't let that happen. It sounds like a lot of work, but as soon as you hit it, it's really obvious what hits it, and you can go from there. For example, I tested a local map kit one for recommendations of what to do around here. And if it recommended the Moulin Rouge, it censored itself and it wouldn't let me get an output. So you might have to be kind of careful when you're doing this thing, but you can dial it in and it does work pretty well.
Thank you.
All right, I think that's all we have for questions. Alex, thank you so much.
Thank you, Alex.
I guess